I'm back. I thought I would just flip through those first slides that you missed. I'm so sorry. I could see them so well. Those are the books that I talked about and the research that I shared with you, and the clinic slide. Let's see, do you have my website, sylviarim.com? You might want to write that down. That's the one that has a lot of handouts for the parents that they might want to read. For example, if they're interested in something on perfectionism or sibling rivalry or dealing with competition, those are all on my website, and they can just download them free of charge. We have a lot of newsletters around the school too that they can use. What does that mean? I'm hearing noise. Here's the Menlo slide when the school was a lot smaller. And here's the big 10 that I was discussing with you. I'm not sure why I did.
Michael, can you make sure that the no sound on here? There might be someone else on there.
So that's not ours.
Just keep rolling with it.
Maybe somebody needs to mute themselves.
Could be.
That may be what we hear. Okay, I was on number 3, and remember I talked about these top 10, and if you need a copy, we can make copies available for you. So the competitive resilience, I spent a lot of time talking about because we come back to that, and I talked about the importance of that in our school, those extracurricular activities, and even in school competitive resilience. You can see that very well sometimes when new kids come to our school who may have been homeschooled or may have been the smartest in their class, but weren't really challenged, and they seem either to get depressed because they feel so inadequate, or they start talking to people like they know everything. Another way of dealing with feeling competitive. So let's go on to number 4, disabilities or mental health problems. That's a very key issue in terms of our school because it's because we're such a good school to help kids with twice exceptionalities. In other words, they're both gifted and they have some disabilities or what feels like a disability. An example would be a kid who's reading at an average level, but is really far ahead in math, or a kid who is reading far ahead and far just average in math. For them, it feels like a disability because by comparison, they feel like they can't do it and they want to hide that disability, and actually it affects how they feel about their strength as well. Then the 5th is appropriate curriculum, and that's so important to you as educators. And if Cassie is watching or seeing this, I don't know if she's here, but she certainly is the curriculum person in our school. But you as teachers at your class level or whatever level you're at is very key to the appropriate curriculum. That is, and as I came up to my office today, I noticed that the 1st grade and kindergarten teachers are checking kids to see where they fit in terms of their groupings and their skills. There's so much variety when they come into kindergarten. That goes also for any new students. We had several requests for grade skips, testing for grade skips before they ever came into our school, but I was able to convince the parents very easily that we would be testing those students and placing them appropriately, and they wouldn't necessarily need a grade skip just because they were ahead a year or 2 in math or reading, that they could do that within their grade level. And I think they were really reassured. So I'll talk a little bit more about appropriate curriculum later. Peer environments are very, very crucial. And I think even if we did everything wrong, which we don't do, we do a lot of things right, the peer environments around other gifted kids is so important. Gifted kids that kids feel they share similar characteristics, as well as gifted kids who are different than them are just very important. There are as many differences among gifted kids as there are other kids, but it's really, really hard on kids. And I'm sure that you don't imagine it's hard on them, and they don't know it's hard on them. They go through school being at the top of their class, doing everything easily. And that used to be before gifted programming was in place, and still is in some school districts. That is so harmful for them. Their self-concept is terrific, but the resilience is terrible. And that's what we need to keep in mind. We're not so interested in kids feeling that they're brilliant. We're interested in their feeling that they're smart and they can adjust and they will not have to win and be best at everything to accomplish. Now, I work really hard on the United Positive Parenting, and I'll discuss that more, but I usually talk to parents. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do that this year, and probably if I do it, I'll be doing it the same way I'm talking to you, because we certainly can't bring parents together. But particularly for new parents to the school who've never heard me speak and don't know my work, it's so difficult for parents to compromise and respect each other when they think they're right and the other parent is wrong. And teaching them to compromise and respect each other is key to their learning in your classroom. Because if they're taught to respect their parents and they're taught to respect their teachers, they learn a great deal in school. And that doesn't mean they won't question you. That just means that they realize that you're doing something important. You have to make sure you understand you're doing something important. And it's very, very important that parents understand you're doing something important. Just for one moment, think about the teachers in your own life. Now, I know it's different with kids being at home and not being in the classroom, but just think of yourself when you were in the classroom as a child. And just remember when you were in kindergarten, third grade or fifth grade, and the teacher was talking to you, and the teacher gave you an indication they thought you were capable or said something positive to you. It meant so much. Young kids absolutely fall in love with their teachers, and they really, really will miss you, except in the way that they can see you on a screen, which is just not the same. So just know that you're important, whether you're on the screen or when they come back in the classroom, that you'll make such a difference for them if you can bring out the positive in them. And that's where number 8 comes in. There's the positive parenting, and parents have to be advocates and support school and support teachers. And when I talk to new parents, and I've done this every single year, I have talked to new parents and said to them, when you come to our school, teachers are willing to reach out and communicate with you. You need to be respectful to them. And if you are disrespectful to your children's teachers, they will not learn in our school, and they will be disrespectful to their teachers and to you too, because you're giving them power and a message that's appropriate. Then we go on to role models, and kids are watching their teachers, kids are watching their parents, and as they get older, their peers become very, very important role models. And the role model issue is very crucial in times when two parents aren't necessarily married to each other. They may live in different households. They may be married to each other, but may not be. Role models, and kids are watching. I hear kids say, I'm a lot like my father, and I'm afraid that I'm a lot like my father. I don't have confidence in myself because I see he's such a bad person. Or I hear people saying, yes, I'm exactly like my mother, only this is a mother who doesn't see the child any more than once a year. I'm exactly like my mother. And she already feels rejected by that mother. How can that child find the role model that says that I'm okay? Not so easy. So it's role models who are teachers, parents, siblings, and peers. And finally, reasonable balance. I remember um, uh, when I first sort of got into the gifted field, and hardly any schools had gifted programs, and all the teachers would say, well, they just have to be well balanced. They just have to be well balanced. And I would say to them, but they're not well balanced because they're extreme. They're extremely smart. They hear and see things, and it is true. They are extreme, and yet they have to find balance in their life. They can't just follow their passions. That just isn't going to work. Their passions can get them into a lot of trouble. So we want them to love their learning at least some of the time. We do want that to be intrinsically interesting some of the time. But guess what? We want them also to experience boredom, to understand that creativity without rigor will get them nowhere. They really need to have both. And that's a hard combination. So that reasonable balance when they tell you, I don't want to learn this. This is boring. I don't like to write. I shouldn't have to write. I'm going to be a scientist. Or I shouldn't have to do math. I hate math. You've got to help them, as we do when we see them in counseling, so that they understand that, yes, there is more to contribution. There is more to making a living than just being passionate about your work. And that has become such a nonsense statement. I see it. I see posters in private schools. We teach you to be passionate about your work. And I think, well, that sounds good. And people do learn more when they love their work. But it's also important to have reasonable balance. So I guess what goes around comes around. And that's the top 10. And now I'm going to go through those in many more details so that you can identify with them. And please write down questions for yourself now so that I can answer all of your questions. And I would like to do that. Now, I'll go through Dabrowski's overexcitabilities or supersensitivities in gifted children rather quickly, but just want to give you a little sense of the intensity in the kids in your classroom, not all of them, of course, but many of them that you're working with. This is research that was done of talented adults of their childhood, the characteristics they saw in themselves. And as I go through them, you'll see some wonderful characteristics, and you will see some really awful characteristics. Now, actually, in controlled research, you see many of these characteristics in non-gifted people as well. But so the ones that you will love, that deep curiosity and the love of problem solving and the asking of probing questions that go over and over and over and over again, sometimes are really interesting, sometimes are attention getters. And you've got to figure out when the questions don't stop, whether this is just a child trying to capture class attention or whether he really is excited and interested and can do the independent thinking to find his own answers or not. So that's one. Now, the sensual and imaginational, I have to tell you that craving for pleasure is normal to small degrees, but to large degrees can cause a little bit of a problem. Not everything is pleasurable, as is tactile sensitivity, which seems to be a pretty common problem, but usually kids outgrow that. I love it when they have an appreciation of beauty in writing, music, art, or nature, and I hope we teach and encourage that. Now, the imaginational, and I do see a lot of kids with the imaginational problems, the vivid dreams and the fears at night. And when I ask them about their fears and they tell me that, oh, I know I shouldn't be afraid of ghosts, but at night I still see them. I'm still afraid at night. And they're so reassured when I tell them, I hear that from a lot of kids, even some kids older than you, but you'll outgrow it. It'll happen. You'll do better at it. And the magical thinking is part of how they plan to become professional football players without even playing on a football team, plan to be on television as an actor or actress. And that's actually what I found in the Growing Up Too Fast research, that for boys, the most frequent goal was professional sports. And for girls, the most frequent goal was being on television. So then the imaginary friends, we have those too, and those are characteristics of highly creative kids, and they can talk to their imaginary friends. That happens a lot with only children, particularly. Then the psychomotor, and this looks a lot like ADHD, and sometimes it is. The compulsive talking, the competitiveness, the nervous habits, the rapid speech, the impulsive behavior is the one that's related to ADHD. But we can have high energy without having ADHD. And if you see kids who have some of these characteristics, and if you think it's possible that they may have ADHD, please call me in, let me know. I can talk to parents. I can observe that child. I can help to determine whether an intervention with that child can help the child with that problem. Remember that there are a lot of highly verbal gifted kids, and they get praised for their talking. They're often included in adult conversations, and sometimes they want to be the whole conversation. So it may not be ADHD, it may just be giftedness gone astray, and we can help that. I never, ever recommend medication until we do an intervention with both parents and with the class. After that doesn't mean that I don't hypothesize, even at the start, that some of the kids will probably need medication. But for some of those kids, after we do an intervention, it does stop and they learn to control it. For some of them, they just keep right on talking, and we do need to intervene with medication. And the emotional, right now, anxiety is normal. So if you see a lot of anxiety, it's just part of our times. We feel a lot of anxiety. We have to reassure our kids. We can't wipe anxiety out in a time of COVID. We could just help kids to minimize it. We have to be really, really careful, and I'm hoping I'll be able to talk to parents about their exposure to news at home. It's not so great for them to see the death rates increasing every day on the news. It can be very, very scary. So I don't think we can remove anxiety from anyone at this time of COVID, but we certainly can reduce it and help kids to stay busy and to deal with it. And so all those are things that we look at. The loneliness is really important, and I have to tell you that there are many a gifted child who has heard me talk about the loneliness that gifted experience, and they say, that was me, that was me, that was just me. You helped me understand I wasn't really alone, and that was really helpful. Are you thinking we need a break?
Yep, first break is scheduled for now to 10 minutes from now, so 9:40.
Okay, this is a perfect, I'm just going to discuss this,
Okay.
and then right after this is a good break. Okay?
All right, y'all hear that?
Okay.
So after this slide, we're going to take a little 10-minute break, and I'll kind of tell you the exact time after we're done with this slide. Thank you, Sylvia.
Okay, so here's my Rimm model of achievement and underachievement. And I think it'll help you to understand kids. And I know you'll tend to see them with a label, but more typically you'll see, well, he's a little bit between passive Paul and perfectionist Paul, or something like that. And many people come in and tell me about, she's my marching to the beat of a different drummer kid, or my rebellious Rebecca kid. So the labels happen. But let me explain the diagram, because it will really help you to understand what underachievement's about. So in the inner circle, not the inner city, but in the inner city circle too, we have the kids I call achievers. And this is kids or adults. And basically what they've done is they have the connection between effort and outcome. They know that if you work, things get better, and when you don't work, you're in trouble. But they understand they have control over that by how much effort they put in. Those are also the kids I've told you have learned to deal with the competition. They love to win, and that's healthy and normal, but they understand you can't win it all, and they're respectful when other people win. They're basically have learned the rules of good sportsmanship, and I always love sports for that purpose because it applies to all of life. Now, they don't have to stay in the inner circle all their life. All they have to do is stay in the inner circle for much of their life so that they can be resilient. The kids on the outside of the inner circle, those little faces, are kids who are using defense mechanisms. You remember Sigmund Freud. When I learned about Sigmund Freud, I didn't think he knew what he was talking about. But when he talked about defense mechanisms, it makes sense. That's the way a human being protects him or herself when they feel inadequate. The covering up. Maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I don't know the answer. And they cover it up. So kids cover it up in various ways. And part of their covering up depends on the temperament, the genetic temperament they're born with. And part of it, covering up, depends on environment. So what causes the environment? It's parents and teachers who respond to kids. What causes environmentally going in either dependent or dominant ways is kids continue to do things that they get positive attention for or gives them power. And I don't dare say this in this world today, but as we know, too much power corrupts. As in government, too much power corrupts in families. Too much power corrupts in classrooms. We want to empower children gradually as match it with their development and with their responsibility. And we can make a real mistake by empowering them too quickly. And then if we try to take power away, they get angry, feel disempowered, feel angry and depressed. So I have them divided in quadrants I call them conformity and nonconformity, dependence and dominance. But they're actually a continuum, they're not discrete quadrants, and some children overlap between the two. So the kids in the upper quadrants are less extreme. They don't look like they're underachieving. So perfectionist Pearl doesn't appear to be underachieving, except when you criticize what she's written, the tears come, and then she can't get started writing again. And she could be Paul as well. It could be the boy who can't get started on his science project or his invention connection because he can't think of the perfect idea. So those are, they're underachieving a little bit, but it's not extreme. Or passive Paul that just doesn't seem to say or do anything, and yet underneath he feels inadequate. And those are also the kids who are doing in a dependent or sensitive kind of way, an oversensitive way. So they're not calling out to you and getting mad at you and blaming you. They're instead blaming themselves, those kids on the left side. When it gets more extreme to the dependent nonconformers, we have kids who actually get sick because they're so anxious or get taunted and feel inadequate. And finally, the worst goes to depressed Donna or Don. So if you follow from perfectionist Pearl to depressed Don or Donna, then you see how it gets worse and worse and worse if it continues, if that becomes part of the child's persona. So if you get depressed once in a while, you're not depressed, Donna. If you're in a state of depression and can't even get yourself going, you're really, really depressed. The kids you're likely to see as underachievers are not going to be all the way down to depressed Don or Donna. That tends to happen. It might happen by 7th or 8th grade or high school, and more likely even college. But you can see a lot of the passive Pauls, a lot of the poor Pollies, who asked you for more help than they need. And they actually are getting attention by asking you for help. and they do the same thing at home. And they don't need that help, but they think they need that help. They're so afraid to make a mistake that they're constantly asking for help. So you're looking for those patterns. And when it's a continuous pattern, then you know something's fostering it. When a child asks for help, you always want to give them the help the first time. That's not a pattern. That's healthy. But when they're constantly asking for help, you have to determine whether they actually need that help and really don't know, or whether that's become an attention getter. For us as counselors, for example, there are kids who want to see the counselor every week, and they just love telling their problems to the counselor. And yes, sometimes the problems are real and sometimes they're imagined, but maybe they just love the counselor's attention. And we have to figure that out. And of course, we know better, we understand that we have to get that turned around, so we can't continue to let that happen. So for the dependent kids, now I'm not talking about the kids who are anxious and dependent once in a while, but the ones who have a pattern, you have to respond counterintuitively. So your intuition as a caring educator is to help them because their tears and their body language seems so helpful. Instead, you have to reach out to them and show them how to help themselves so that they can move forward, and you can prove to them that they can handle things that they didn't think they could handle before. Now let's go to the dominant kids. The dominant kids on the other side are the somewhat over-empowered kids. Now, that can happen from home and school and experience. So the top quartile really looks positive. How can academic Alice be considered an underachiever when she's valedictorian of the class? The answer is she's never had a failure experience. She's not been challenged enough to know that there are still hard things out there. She's had such success that she's not dealt with failure. The same with Jock Jack, who could be captain of the sports team, or Social Chandra, who's the most popular in the class, and Dramatic Dan, who's a lead in the play. These kids are having marvelous experiences, and they're not necessarily underachievers. But if they're only doing what they do best, where they've not experienced failure, they're not well prepared for the world. There isn't much you have to do to give them a little preparation, but they have to experience not getting the lead part in the play once. And they have to understand that, yes, other people need to have social life. And academic Alice truly has to experience a hard class where maybe she'll get a B on a test and will not fall apart. So it's because it really is hard. But the risk is great if they don't have it. And I think of a young man, he was not my client, it was someone else's clients on our clinic, but he was extraordinary, off the charts gifted. And in high school, he was already accepted to colleges of his choice. He was a senior. He was taking an advanced physics class for which he didn't have the math preparation, and he got a C on the first test. And when he got that C on the first test, he attempted suicide. Did not die, fortunately. And but the shock, and I heard about that when I spoke in Hong Kong, where I spoke to the Gifted Society. That was one of the major problems they had in Hong Kong, because the kids were so perfectionistic, but were in shock when they came to the real world where they weren't able to do something. So it becomes our job, and it's part of our job in terms of providing challenge to them, to be sure that they do experience failures in the situation where kind teachers can help them to understand it's okay and that they'll survive. And the more extreme dominant kids who could be over-empowered at home and in school are manipulative Mary, creative Chris, rebellious Rebecca, and bully Bob. And of course, they tend, and Torn Thomas, who is torn between two parents. These kids are very over-empowered. The parents are busy punishing them, grounding them for life, and they're punishing their parents back. The same thing happens in school when we overpunish these kids, and we have to be very careful. They have to have a consequence. They have to be reminded we're on their side. It's for their own good. It's not very easy to do because they were given power too quickly, and power without responsibility is animal anarchy. And believe it or not, I heard that quote, and I'm sorry I don't know the person's name, but I heard that at my son's medical school graduation. Power without responsibility is animal anarchy. And you've seen the situations. I'm sure there have been some kids you've seen like that. So those kids who march to the beat of a different drummer, who have the potential to be creative, we have to teach them to recognize the value of creativity. But the value of creativity is not drugs. It's not alcohol. It really is creative productivity. And when they don't learn the rigor that goes with creativity, if they don't learn the value that goes with creativity, drugs makes them feel very, very creative. And unfortunately, it does really happen with gifted children. And I can tell you that I have worked with some of those gifted children who have, first started with alcohol and then marijuana. Pretty soon they're experimenting with hard drugs. And then we lose what their wonderful abilities. So that gives you a good sense. Now, how do we respond to these kids who are in a pattern? It is counterintuitive too, because intuitively you would like to shake them. You would really like to say, what's wrong with you? You're so smart. You could do so much. Why aren't you out there working hard and making a contribution? It will not work. It will not work. You have to let them know you're on their side. You have a plan. You have to help them with a plan and let them know that they can move forward. Yes, there has to be a consequence, but they have to not see you as the opposition. And that can be very hard. You can have a hard time with that. That gives you a little bit of the perspective. We'll come back to it in much more detail. And now I do think you need a 15-minute break so we can return at 10 o'clock. I'm giving another 15-minute break. So
15?
you're here.
Okay.
You should go over there so I can see you.
Oh, well, he was there working on the computer.
5, 10, 15. What? So we're going to be back a little bit before 10.
I told them 10.
Okay, 10. Beautiful.
Mhm.
I'm going to take this, and I am going to.
Right on there.
Yeah,
Come back.
but let's. You can come back to this definitely. I want to make sure that.
I can't see you behind you.
I know, when they put the screen there, I was like, oh.
It is good. The screen is good. I can see the teachers.
Good.
So how many are there? 10? 18? Looks like 18. That's not too bad.
Yeah. So if you would both just kind of join me over here. So that you can count too.
Do I need mine? Yes.
You can. You got it?
Can you hear me?
hard to the area of communication, but I almost think like almost with me so I know I guess
He just sat there and stared at the board. He just wants to do what else. He said he taught virtual starting in March. Hopefully soon.
Sylvia, I want to apologize for that mess and thank you for holding it and being flexible. That was not easy. You know what? Worst things I want everyone to be able to grab and break hydrate. I definitely. And just remember when you come back, if they can't hear it right now, so if you come back in. No, they can see and hear you if you come back. And I will get you. I will get you off to the races, and then I have to talk to you guys.
that okay?
Well, he's working on
Okay.
his computer, but you know what if we,
That's smart. Oh, yes, that's very
like
smart. But
this?
look, there's nothing on the screen now. So what does that mean?
What do you mean?
My PowerPoint is gone. Representing. Oh, I just go to presenting.
Yeah. So then you can see them, and you can see me.
Hi, y'all. I'm Carla.
People are coming back.
Can you mute us again?
So it says stop sharing. I think I might need some help here. How do I get back to my presentation mode?
If you click that, does that
Oh,
do
okay,
anything?
thank you. Got it. Okay. It's the first time I've done a presentation like this, so it doesn't come up. See me and I see them, but you are presenting, but I don't see the slideshow.
How do we get back to the slide?
Yep, sure thing. Let me get there. For you, Sylvia.
So I didn't know. I'm on screen now, but.
Yep. Yep. And we're going to.
And I have them there.
Yep, and then there's actually more people than that. There's 32 people in the room, but it's, I'll see if I can change that display for you. There's some more people, but I'm not sure how possible that is. Can you all hear me on Sylvia's monitor?
Yes, I can hear
Yes.
you.
Okay. This is my screen. So when it says
Okay.
microphone is off,
Okay.
that's because
But
it's
my
coming from a
microphone
different
is on.
computer. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Now I'm going to, well, let's go back again to where we were. We'll start from here and talk about more specifically how we deal with the dependent and dominant kids and specific cases. And remember that you're writing questions down, making notes, so that when we have time for question answer, I'll be glad to answer your questions. So the kids that are underachieving will say, here's an example. This is the younger brother of 2, and the older brother is high achieving. Now, this gives me the opportunity to talk about sibling rivalry too, and siblings in the family, because we do have several children, a lot of families that have several children at their school. And there are issues that go with 2 children families or only children families that are very important. First of all, even if they're biologically related and or are identical twins, environment tends to play a huge difference. Now, if you recall, it's power and attention that moves kids in one direction or another. And so very, very usually we have an achiever and a somewhat underachiever. It's very, very hard to keep the kids all achieving. It's doable, but they do play off each other. And so if there are 2 boys, it's likely that one is going to be all organized and all set for school and ready. And the second one is going to say, where are my papers? Where are my books? And that seems to be the pattern of attention that takes place. In this case, this was the second child. And I asked him why in the world he wasn't doing his schoolwork. He was gifted, and he said, well, if you're really smart, schoolwork should always be easy. And that's the defensive part. And of course, they find their passion, and I'd like to be a rock star. And I joke about that because they think that the passion means if you're passionate about something, it's got to be easy. And they haven't learned that work ethic that Carol Dweck talked about, that some of you have had in service on, and understand the importance of the mindset of effort making a difference. This is what I talked about before in terms of the words that surround a child. It's motivation and underachievement that are flip sides of the same coin, because you have to have some praise. Praise is good, but too much praise can be too much of a good thing. And that only child or first child that's perfect, that's brilliant, that's beautiful, that's going to cure cancer can't possibly live up to that. And she smiles a lot until there's work to do. And then she's not exactly sure how she's going to get to being curing cancer. And if she makes a mistake, that's terrible. So that first child, who is king special and is full of attention, seems to be doing really well until child number 2 comes into the world. And then he goes through a process that I call dethronement. And so he may continue to do well. It may be the second child who becomes the social kid and doesn't quite look like he's going to achieve to his abilities. But on the other hand, it's possible he'll be dethroned. And if he's dethroned and the second child, a girl or another brother, starts to get attention, that child turns off so much, you think this cannot be a gifted child anymore, because they really just change in temperament and personality. And I call it dethronement. And it becomes very important for you to know if there's a brother or sister in the school. You're not going to say when that child comes, oh, you're just like your brother. And the teachers almost always do. You can say, his brother, and it's nice to know he's another brother, but be careful you don't say, are you as brilliant as your brother? You're probably as brilliant as your brother, because that's the pressure that reduces the child to feeling like I can never do anything as well as my brother. The referential talk that surrounds a child is not only direct talk, but what he hears about adults. And here you are talking to mom and kids at the conference, and you're telling the mom that her son is really brilliant. Needless to say, he feels wonderful about that. He doesn't feel that as pressure when you say it. He feels really excited that he's that smart. But when the going gets tough, that's when he thinks, maybe I'm really stupid. And so we as teachers try to be very careful about what you say in front of kids. It isn't that you can't say anything. You can say he's a hard worker and he's a smart kid. That's fine. But if you say things that are extreme, they internalize that, either extremely low or extremely high. And those are the things they're listening to, even if they're outside the door. And I want to help you understand that we need to be somewhat spontaneous in our lives. And we can't always plan what we say. And as a parent or as a teacher, you will sometimes say these things, and please know you're forgiven. Just try to be careful. And it's hard not to, because these things are in your mind, you're observing them, but do try to be sensitive. And again, I'm telling you that in the most gentle way that I can, because I know you have a million things you're doing, and I care very much about you and want you to be successful and happy. And I know you want to do this. You wouldn't pick teaching if you didn't want to help kids and want to help people. And I appreciate that very much. So don't think I'm expecting perfection. I understand you're going to slip, but be sensitive to it, please. Oops, wait a minute. I think I did that wrong. Now I want to tell you about the creative kid, because the marching to the beat of a different drummer kids are kind of my specialty, and I value creativity. And I've referred to this already, so some of this is repetition. But this young man was in kindergarten when I met him, and he came from northern Wisconsin to my clinic in southeastern Wisconsin soon after I started my practice. And I mean, I can't trace every child I work with, and some I can't even remember their names, and certainly not their abilities, but I won't forget this young man whose name is John. And he came to me, his parents came and said, we don't know what to do. He's been referred to special education. And he learned to read before he ever entered school and was reading about third grade level. And he was doing workbooks, and they were boring, so he didn't want to do them. And the teacher assumed he couldn't do them. So she put him in the middle reading group instead of the high reading group. And there were still workbooks, and he didn't like workbooks. So they finally put him in the lowest workbook where they were doing reading group, where they were doing cut and paste. And so he got a little bored. And so there was a jar of paste in front of him. He put his hand in, and he watched that paste come out and shot his hand up and said, oh, that's the theory of displacement that my father taught me about. Well, that was a referral to special education. So we quickly figured things out, and we set up really just a simple reward system. We put him in an appropriate reading group, and when he got his work done, he could go up and work with a fifth grade mentor, fifth grade student mentor on the computer as a reward for getting his work done. He got his work done. Most important, I had to change what his father was saying to him. His father could have been a wonderful role model, and how he accidentally said, when the boy came home and said the workbooks were boring, he said, school was boring for me too. And that was permission for this boy to take on a teacher. Otherwise, he would have fallen in love with his teacher. But there were the workbooks, and his father said they were boring for him, so why wouldn't that be so? Needless to say, he had a loving father who was a very good father, was unintentionally saying something about the teacher and the class that was really harmful. You know, that could happen in dozens of classrooms. It could happen to dozens and dozens and hundreds of parents without realizing it. How easy it was for him to change it. How easy it was for the dad to say, oh, you be a good hard worker and you can do some really creative things. And that's what he did. So it took, you know, a couple of months. And for a kindergartner, it's pretty easy to reverse underachievement. And he was doing just fine. But the interesting thing was his family moved a lot, and every time they moved, they would come to see me about once a year. And he went to quite a few schools. And one of the recommendations I had made was for him to play sports so he could learn about winning and losing and sportsmanship. And so every Christmas, and I have a ton of these letters, but I won't read them all to you, I would hear from his mom. And finally, he was in college, and I decided to let you know that he's doing swimmingly well. He made the dean's list both semesters as a physics major in his junior year. So there he was, finding the theory of displacement. Having decided to change to electrical computer engineering major, he took a computer summer class, got A's at mid-semester this fall. He had 4 A's and 1 B at Marquette University, this was. Not everything has changed. He's still a romantic. His aspiration is to be a tour guide in Siberia or to work with grizzly bears, both after getting a PhD in something important. He was the most improved player on the hockey team. Oh, I said soccer, it's hockey, I'm sorry. Last year, second high scorer, and it's very obvious when the team is on or off the ice that he likes everyone and everyone likes him. Thank you so much. Happy holidays, Kathleen. And it continued, and the young man decided to get a master's in cinema photography. And then I got a letter and said, John received his master's in December. Hallelujah. You will enjoy Jewels of the Jungle. Thank you for always being there. Then I got books on National Geographic as he became a photographer for National Geographic. And let's see, can you see this wedding picture? Then I got the wedding picture and more letters about his being on television or Mongolia, I think it was, and he was going to be on 2020. and the letters continued and the pictures continued until I finally got pictures of him sitting reading How to Parent So Children Will Learn when he had his own children. And I'm not sure if I can show you this, but this is a picture of him and his two kids. And they still come. So those marching to the beat of the different drummer kids, and I tell you, I have quite a few. Some became lawyers, some became doctors, some became artists, and I treasure them, and you should treasure them. The creativity is very important. There needs to be creativity in the classroom. There need to be creative options, and you need to be able to help them understand the importance of creativity and rigor, which they would call boredom. But remember that boredom means different things to different kids. And while boredom may mean that a child is not challenged, it may also mean a child is too challenged, or that there's just something new there, or the child is insecure. But those gifted kids often dress to be different by the time they're in middle school, and it's almost like they're waving a flag. Look how different I am. I am the most different person in the world. Now, here's where competition comes in. The most crucial thing is to find them areas where they can express their creativity appropriately. It could be theater, it could be art, it could be music, it could be math. But the creativity is extremely important for them, and helping them to understand that there's a value of creativity, that in the real world there'll be creativity, but it has to be combined with rigor, and there is some boredom involved. Excuse me, I'll just go back to that. So please value that, and because I know that we are including in the curriculum some creativity, and perhaps someone can give you an in-service later on the late Don Treffinger's creative problem-solving approach, because that creative problem-solving includes the importance of brainstorming and thinking of unusual ideas, with also the evaluation and the determination of what's important and what can finally be useful and rigorous. So that's very, very key. And I think the model you're using now that's been inserted in the curriculum probably has that as a plan as well. But that combination is so crucial. I'm a consultant for a design studio in one of the Catholic schools, and they have a creative problem-solving approach to using design as part in the curriculum. And I love our art program in the school, our music program in the school. We have such wonderful opportunities to tie creativity to everything, and I hope that we can do that. And I hope you special teachers are listening and know how valuable I think your contributions are, and how it can be so tied to curriculum. Thank you. Now the power and the V of love that I talked about. And this is to help you to understand more about those over-empowered kids. And when I talk to parents, this is the first slide that I use. And this picture comes in my How to Parent book, and is so, so crucial. Parents are so totally confused about choices for kids, and teachers too. Kids are not supposed to be given all the choices. They're supposed to be given choices that match with their maturity. So there is a place for choices, but it isn't when they're 2. And it's not when they're 3, because if you ask a 2-year-old to make a choice, they'll probably say, no, 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 whenever you try to tell them anything. So it's better, and good old Dr. Spock said, just tell them positively what they're going to do, and they will gradually do it. Then you can praise them for doing it. Well, yes, I suppose you could give them a choice of what cereal at breakfast, but please don't ask them what they want to eat for lunch or dinner. Just present it, or pretty soon you will have a child with an eating problem. And of course, I can tell that to parents, but the same thing holds true with kindergarten through grade 8. by 7th and 8th grade, they can have quite a few choices, and we want them to have exercise and choices. And that's gradual empowerment. But over empowerment is this. It's when you, oops, let's see, wrong thing. Oops, no, I don't have that in here. Sorry. I thought I had that slide in. Over empowerment is the inverted V. And that's when you give kids too many choices too early. If you give them power too early and you say, you make the choice, they will eventually make the choice. But that's contrary to what we know about development. Because what we know about development is that little kids, would like to please their parents and teachers if you let them please them. And if you tell them, no, you make the choice, that means you're teaching them to be oppositional. You're telling them, don't try to please, instead please yourself. And if they get into that habit, they want to do that all the time. And then you're going to find yourself punishing them and consequencing them and being in opposition. It was actually a parent in this school that I worked with many years ago who was a single parent. It's very easy with a single parent to treat an only child almost as a partner. And the kid was so over-empowered. He was so powerful that he just would not listen. This was in 7th grade, to the parent for anything. And she kept punishing him and punishing and increasing the punishment until she put him in jail. She had friends who worked in the police department to make sure that he understood he was supposed to listen. And what I tried to do was just let him know you're on his side constantly as you set a consequence. We don't want to punish you, but this is the consequence, and don't increase it. Make those consequences short. I'd like you to say you could take the computer away from them, but you can't take a computer away in the time that we are in this is such a difficult time, but you can certainly take the video games away from them. And let me just pause at this point, because I will tell this to parents, but you need to help me let parents know this is different when they're learning at home than in the old days when we were just setting up a homework routine. When I set up homework routines for children, I always told the parents they should have a desk in their room and privacy so that you're not sitting in the kitchen and handing them the homework and supervising all their homework. That was the old days. In COVID days, these kids have to have a classroom where the parents are present or nearby, because otherwise they have access to computers that they should not be having. And even though we have all kinds of walls on computers, these kids are technically more savvy than their parents are, and they know how to escape the walls. So it is really important that you consider that their parents at home are co-teachers. You as teacher educators have to look at their parents and tell their parents we're in a partnership. We need to work out how we can communicate together. We do need you to supervise the children. We do need you to be around. And of course, many of these parents are working from home. So they have to have their own desk and an understanding that their desk is not too far from their children's desk. And this is very, very different than what we would have said before COVID. And I'm trying to get this message out to parents as much as possible. I put that in the do's and don'ts in the spring, but we really need to communicate it to the parents now. Now, we can help the parents, and I really will have to talk to parents by the kids at home having pods where parents take turns, where 2 or 3 kids can get together in a neighborhood or in a home, and therefore the parents can have some time to do their own work, and yet there are parent supervisors doing their work. Obviously, it's going to help if those kids are in the same grade because they have peer companionship. So there are things that we can do with kids at home, but quite frankly, I think they're safer at home in pods than they are in school. But what the school decides in terms of choice can work as long as it works. and we'll have to work with it. But if they are at home, parents need help, and I probably will set up some way that I can talk to parents regularly about how to handle their children at home in the time of COVID, because there are so many new events that they have to deal with. But the V of Love is gradual empowerment, and it's by age and grade, and little kids, little sisters and brothers have fewer choices and fewer responsibilities than older brothers and older sisters. And you just tell them that. You can explain the V of Love to kids. And I've done it. I don't know if you can see my V, but I've done it, and I've done it with kids. And then I explain how to a fifth or sixth grader, how gradually they'll get more power. And then the kid will say, well, aren't I up here? No, not yet. Not until you're 20 something and on your own. But they really feel empowered. We have a lot of over-empowered kids. And that happens because gifted kids sound so adult-like that parents assume that they're ready to make decisions before their time. So I'll try to reach as many parents as I can. I know for parents it has helped them immensely when I explain that to them. The unfortunate thing is when they don't reach me until they're adolescent, and then it's much, much harder. But truly, for kindergarten and first grade, when I get to those parents early, they thank me forever. They come back and thank me in the halls and say, one session, you got us straightened out. So it's really important that you teachers of the younger kids, let me know if you have some over-empowered kids. They may not be ADHD. They may simply be in control of their homes at home and think they should be in charge of your classroom. And then the sibling issue that I've talked about before, that I see over and over again. How would you feel if everything you tried to do, your brother did better? That's his girlfriend. This comes from a book called, let's see, I can't remember what the book was called. Let's see, Gifted Kids Have Feelings Too. It's written by myself and kids. It's all based on gifted kids. But the sibling issue is something we try to deal with in counseling, but be sensitive to it as teachers as well, so that you don't make the kinds of comparisons. You can say good things about their brothers and sisters. Just make sure that they know that they're not left behind. So when we set expectations too high, we run into problems. What we find is achieving students set moderately high expectations. Underachievers set expectations too high or too low. And sometimes they go from too high to too low very quickly. Too high expectations cause depression. And that's so hard with those kids who have spectacular talents. And I'm thinking of the musicians. Yesterday, someone sent me an email of a 3-year-old violinist, and the child was absolutely extraordinary. And I was thinking, amazing. Now, if he doesn't become a Beethoven or a Mozart, what will happen to him? Everything will crash. But, you know, there are kids with really, really huge talents. But I have to tell you that those with the musical talents, those with the artistic talents are in a dilemma. And we want them to follow those passions, but we want them to keep their grades up too and not count on being solo violinists. The poor solo violinist that I'm thinking of who attempted suicide had only one thing in mind, that she was going to be a solo violinist. And when she got to college, she found out she was good enough to play in an orchestra, but would never make it as a solo violinist. How many solo violinists are there in the world? Not very many. And she attempted suicide and could not even hear or listen to music or play music. She became so depressed. She actually regrouped and went to medical school. And I suppose that is good because she was highly intelligent and kept her ability up. And the anxiety that comes with too high expectations. the anxiety that gets kids not even to try out for the play, or the kid who wants to be the professional basketball player but says, I can't play on competitive teams, and still is anxious about it. Take me out of the gifted program. I'm not that gifted, because they don't want challenge. And I won't take piano lessons. I just like to play for myself, as a kid who doesn't want to make mistakes and just wants to sit there and imagine he sounds wonderful. So helping the anxious kids regroup and take a chance of trying, or to find some other activity that makes them feel good about themselves, is really not too hard if you catch on to what's going on. But if they hide out and don't tell you what's going on, you don't know. Now, let's talk about curriculum, and because that is your specialty and that is so crucial. This is so, so crucial. And I assured those parents who wanted to grade skip their kids that you would place them in the right group. And if not, I promised them I would talk to the teachers and make sure they got there. Children will continue to achieve if they usually see the relationship between the learning process and its outcomes. And this is a key issue to why we have gifted programming. It truly is. What this diagram just shows you is how kids will stay achievers. And that is if they learn that when they work hard, usually the outcomes are good. The transitions that cause academically to them to become underachievers are quadrant 2 and quadrant 3, where quadrant 2 is where they work hard and they have bad results. And that's for the twice exceptional kid, or the kid who's getting work that's just impossibly hard. And they are working hard and they finally give up. So the kid with a reading disability or a math disability, where the work actually has to be made easier for them. Quadrant 3 is the traditional problem for kids who aren't in gifted programming and who aren't being challenged, and everything is easy and they get all A's easily. And they get all A's easily and they get all A's easily. And then they hit a place where there's challenge and they fall apart in quadrant 4, where there's absolutely no connection between effort and outcome, and they don't get it at all. And underachievement is the place where kids say, oh, I don't understand why I got a C on that test. I studied so hard last night, which means they had television on and the book was in their lap and they were lying down half asleep and they thought they were called that study, and they really didn't know how to study. So what we're trying to do is match effort and outcomes. And it isn't necessary to do it 100% of the time. It's okay for kids to have experiences where they can't do something right away and they can't figure it out. And it's okay for them to have occasional easy things. But most of the time, they have to have that match. And if they're telling you they don't have the match, then we've got to figure out where. And you've got to ask them if they're being sufficiently challenged or too challenged. And don't hesitate to ask them if it's too challenging, because then you can back up a little and there's going to be a lot of variation. Now, I know that's a lot to ask because we're basically saying individualize, but truly it isn't so much individualize as find the right groupings, because it is truly better. Now, I know we can't do this with COVID, but we really want them to work in groups. We really want them to work in partnerships. We want them to do things together because that's the way of the world. We want them also to do things separately. They have to have both experiences, but we don't want them only to work alone. We're requiring them to work alone temporarily, unless you can get, parents can get groups together, pods together where kids can actually have some home experiences with 2 or 3 other friends. Are you talking? Your mic is off. It says, has my mic gone off? No. Can you hear me? Yes, you can hear me.
No, your mic is on.
Okay.
Yep, go ahead.
That really scared me.
No, you're fine.
Okay. Okay. I don't want to talk so much and no one hear me. Okay, now here's the parent component again. And this one, the parents will hear about, and I do talk to them. Rimm's Law number 1, I just want you to know that I am asking the parents to back you. And that's very, very important. Children are more likely to be achievers if their parents join together to give the same clear message of positive message about school effort and expectations. And this is something you see in the classroom. Children become oppositional defiant. If one adult allies with them against a parent or a teacher, making them more powerful than an adult. Understand that if a child is oppositional with you, if they are rebellious with you, they've gotten a license to do that. And it likely comes from home. Now, that doesn't mean it's intentional. It could be something, it could be a grandma talking in the background and saying that teacher doesn't know what they're doing. They don't know how smart your grandchild is. It doesn't take much for a child to get permission to take you on. The kids have told me, and it is truly a balancing act at home. So it's not so easy. It is trickier than it's ever been. We have many single parent families, 2-parent families in a second marriage, 2-parent families in a first marriage, 3-parent families, 4-parent families. We have families where grandparents are doing much of the parenting while the parent works. So we have every relationship you can think of. And sometimes they're really terrific and work well together, but sometimes they want to work well together and really mess up. You know, we have some grandparents telling their kids that the parents aren't doing it right. We have some parents telling the kids the grandparents aren't doing it right. And the father and mothers, where they're divorced, they can be very, very oppositional. If that's happening, please tell the parents to let me know. I'm an expert at helping them parent together. Really, I can help them so much, and they will be so appreciative. And it's not easy because they're different people. And it's just a matter of figuring out the dynamics where kids can respect you all. And just subtle things about their own schooling, like that one father who said school wasn't creative enough for him either. I mean, a small thing like that made a huge difference for a kindergarten kid. And you know how many people could possibly drop things like that, particularly if they were underachievers. So for you, remember, if you have kids at home, to talk about your wonderful teachers that you had, and talk about the other teachers in the school as being good. If you say negative things about the teachers in the school and your children are listening, they're ready to take on teachers. You gave them permission. And there are good teachers and there are bad teachers, but most teachers are at least average. Failing teachers don't stay in our school. We get rid of them. We ask them to leave. So everybody is at least average, and we have some amazing teachers. And so, you know, if a kid is hearing that teacher isn't too bright, you know what that kid is going to say to you. And so thank a teacher. I ask parents to thank a teacher. And if you just stop for one moment, just one moment, to think about the teachers in your life that made a difference. I can tell you I remember their names, and by the end of this session, I'll give you all of my teachers' names, K through 12. They made that huge difference in my life. And, you know, they made that difference in yours. You may have forgotten some of them because you don't give this talk every year. But it really is important for your kids to know that teachers are important. And at this time, with COVID-19 going, and the teachers are indirect, they can't touch kids, they can't smile at kids. I mean, they can, but you know, they're on a screen, they're not there. They need your help. So I'm saying that to parents. Now let's go to the passions that we're dealing with, that headlines are giving us. Oprah Winfrey saying, follow your passion, and every private school saying, follow your passion, and kids coming in to me saying, why won't my teacher let me follow my passion? And then I have to go through explaining that we want you to have dreams, but we want you to be realistic, and it's so important for you to learn. So I have this little acrostic with real. Don't steal their dreams, but temper passion with reason. Are there real career opportunities in that passion? Effort and perseverance are appropriate mindsets. There's our friend Carol Dweck again. Adolescents need to become resilient, and we have to teach them that. And learning to be strategic is important. Help them to be strategic. And then strategies. Here's the strategies for students with passions in highly competitive careers. That's your artists and your musicians who just really are extremely talented and really are hoping that they're going to be successful. I have one in my family that my grandson married, and she is a magnificent artist and has a huge debt, but there won't be a way she can work as an artist, and how sad it is. But she's found other alternatives. Strategies for students with passions in highly competitive careers. Practice in the passion area so you can better determine if your talent is really going to lead you to that field. Maintain alternative skills in case passion doesn't work out. That means work on math too, work on reading too. Strive to win in competitions and join collaborations to compare your talent. Excuse me, I have to take a drink of my iced tea, losing my voice. So what that means, that's the importance of music competitions and art competitions. And if you're not making it in local competitions, it's likely you should do your music or art for your sake of self-expression and fun, but you probably won't make it into the career field. Skills, select coaches or teach you high-level skills. Here comes the tea again, sorry. Install a deadline to rethink your career directions and opportunities.
We have another official break scheduled in like a few minutes.
Oh,
so
good.
You break
Perfect.
when you feel like it. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Opportunities are not realistic. Select alternative directions and never stop enjoying your passion, but make it into your hobby. There are many, many wonderful musicians and artists who have groups that play music on the side while they do other careers. Music and art education are potential, but even those are highly competitive. So I do value the arts, and I love our art teachers, our encore teachers, and do continue the artwork, but do know that the careers are scarce in those fields. Just a few more, and then we're going to take a break. The strategies for students with no specific interests. Now, let me just explain to you, the students that have no specific interests often feel very strange about it because they're told to find a passion, and if they're not really good at it, they give up. So you want to lower the level of passion to interests. So interest can guide you. Explore your interests. You don't be best at things. Negotiate time to extend other interests. Remember that you don't have to be best at something to enjoy it. Test new activities with friends. Explore many extracurricular activities. Raise your grades. Work hard on school subjects to raise your grades. Experiment with part-time and volunteer jobs. That really holds more for high school kids, although volunteer jobs are wonderful for our 7th and 8th graders to mentor younger kids, spot mentors and observe what others do, tutor young students to build confidence. The middle school kids can really be helpful to the younger kids, and it's great for their confidence. Serendipity, keep alert to serendipitous events or meetings that can lead to opportunities. Some of you may know that I was on the Today Show for 8 years. Now, how does a psychologist who's just working in a clinic doing nothing special get to be on the Today Show? It was straight serendipity, and good luck. At 6:30 in the morning, I was interviewed by Tom Clark on public radio about my first book, Underachievement Syndrome. And I talked about pencil anxiety, a problem little boys have when they can't write and they struggle with handwriting and they avoid doing their work and then they start underachieving. I had a 5-minute interview and Tom Clark called me back and he said, "You described me when I was a child." And he pulled me up on public radio, and I did volunteer work on public radio every 2 weeks, answering parent questions for 5 years. And then he said, "Let's get a national show." And we got a national show going on public radio so I could answer parent questions. And my oldest daughter's friend was a producer on the Today Show. And she came home to Wisconsin and heard me on public radio. And by that time, I'd written 5 or 6 books. And she said, "Could you come to New York?" And experimenting. That friend was pregnant for the first time. And she talked to the executive producer about starting a parenting segment on the Today Show. She said, "I think parents would be interested." I came in a blizzard in February. The flight couldn't go into New York. It went into Boston. I had to take the train into New York. You just could barely walk the streets. Every school on the East Coast was closed. They put me in the first half-hour segment of the show with the snowstorm, and the whole world was watching. And I talked about gifted underachievement, and I got 20,000 calls and 5,000 letters and a contract to be on the Today Show that was renewed for 8 years. I'm not the most talented psychologist in the world, and I had that opportunity. Serendipity plays a part, but you have to know to say yes when serendipity comes about. Supposing when Tom Clark asked me and I said, "No, I'm too busy, you're not paying me. Why should I come on your radio show?" I mean, the whole thing would not have happened. So what I'm telling you, for the kids in the arts or for the kids in specialty areas, they need to work hard, they need to find mentors, and they need to look out for serendipitous experiences. Now it's time for us to take our 15-minute break. Thanks a lot.
All right, kiddos. So we're gonna come back at 11. Sound good? Thumbs
Yes,
up?
yes.
All right, 11 o'clock.
Okay, and I get out of here.
It's funny to listen to you say like,
Mike's on.
that the people that you're talking to are like, "Oh, you're talking about me. You're talking about me." Listening to you talk about like the only child, I'm the only child. It was, I was at one of you, so I was the one who was very crazy. Sure, like here I am. Here I am. I didn't interact with them, but they had full-on lives that I
I just had my laptop being worked on. Can somebody tell me when we're reconvening? No? Deb? Thank you.
going to make sure that we go right back to the slide where you were. It was this green slide, correct? Sylvia, this is where you were?
Yes.
Okay.
Did we just broadcast that food discussion?
No. No. We had the camera off and the microphone off. If we did so, it wouldn't only just be broadcast, it would be recorded.
Yeah, right.
I am actually really looking forward to now for the rest of the staff, I will let you know later. Some big time craziness went down this morning, and it's a good story, but I'll tell you later. But it's kind of all caught on the recording.
Yep.
In the morning, so that'll be good stuff. Sylvia's about to begin in about 2 minutes. So it's 10:58. So just hold tight, everybody.
Okay.
Thank
you.
No, I have to call her. Thanks for reminding me.
It's so great having you. See her.
It is.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah, some of these folks who
Really appreciate it.
you need to put the camera that's actually
Yeah.
doing the recording, so I
Okay,
can wave here. So
yes.
if you wave at this screen, they won't see you.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, and then I'll be back.
Good point.
I gotta make.
That's a
I
good
gotta-
point. If
See,
I wave at the
someone
screen,
should
I
hire
have
me
to
to be
wave
the
here.
virtual learning coordinator.
Oh, is that Katie Tice there?
Just
That is
put
Katie
that
Tice.
on your
Oh,
plate
Katie.
as well. You can do both.
I almost feel like I have been doing both.
Right.
Yeah. All right, I'll be back. Sylvia, when you are ready, everything's set up and ready to go. So when you're
So
ready,
they
you
can see
go.
the screen now?
They can see the screen, and you know it's 10:59. So when you feel comfortable,
Is it Shannon? Yeah.
you can go.
That's great. That's great. I think I'm ready to go. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the last little section here of practical advice and kinds of things we can do. We have the picture again to remind you of the inner circle, and hopefully you're now thinking of one of the kids and you've got a label for him. We had some good discussions of creative Chris's here marching to the beat of a different drummer while with some folk right here, and I'm not too surprised. But those are all familiar. Now you're thinking about that kid and we're going to move forward. On we go. This is a shortcut alliance, and I'll try to emphasize each one, but then I'm going to go through the steps of the model so you can see. So my alliance acrostic, I don't know why I like acrostics, but I think they're kind of cute. It's a shortcut for the whole process. Ally with student privately about interests and concerns. I want to tell you that alliance between you and a child that says, I'm really interested, I think you have the ability, can really make a difference. Listen to what the student says. What the student says is going to tip you off about their defenses. Like if they say to you, I just like creative stuff, or I hate to write, or, you know, they're going to really figure out what's going on there. Learn about what the student is thinking. Initiate opportunities for recognition of the student's strengths. So if they're telling you they're, you know, marching to the beat of a different drummer, if they're telling you they like math, find a place for them to do something where they can get recognition for that strength. Add experimental ideas for engaging curricular or extracurricular activities. So you're going to lead them out of where they're not doing things to where they're doing things. Nurture relationships with appropriate adult and peer role models. Yeah, if you know a teacher who has that same specialty, let that teacher know they could work with them. Or if you have an adult friend that might be helpful, maybe you want them to go out, suggest they go out for drama. That's often something that gives them good opportunities. If they're dramatic anyway, why not join in and present drama? Peer role models, if they're friendless or if they're in the wrong group of peers, you can put them in the right group of peers by just asking them to do some things together. Consequence reasonably but firmly if the student doesn't meet commitments. And I should consequence briefly. So it's not something that goes on and on. I talk to parents, don't ground them for life. If you're going to take something away, it's a day so that they have a chance of getting it back. And emphasize, and the E is for emphasize, effort, independence, realistic expectations, how their strengths can be used to cope with problems, and be very, very patient. That's there for you. And again, that's just a shortcut. I'm going to be talking about other things too. I mentioned role models, and that's important. Role models are really important for them. There might be a grandma, a grandpa, a teacher that they can identify with. And I want to tell you there are 3 variables that make a difference in who a child identifies with. And you can use these. So what the research tells us that children will copy adults if, number 1, they're constantly told they're like that person. So if a child has said, oh, you look just like your dad, or you just look like your mom, or you look like your grandma, that enhances the likelihood that the child will copy the behavior. The second one is nurturance or warmth. If a particular adult goes out of their way and is very nice to them or feels close to them, that too encourages their copying them. And third is the good old power that we talk about. So if the person in the family is powerful, they're more likely to copy them. So nurturance, similarities, and power together cause a child to copy a parent or another adult. That's really important because one of the issues we have with boys is that sometimes their fathers are not involved enough. And I get to involve their fathers, and that can make a big difference. So if I can say they're like their dad in some ways, that is enough to get that kid thinking, oh, I guess I can do some things with my dad and I can do some work projects. And one of the things I recommend is work projects between fathers and sons. I mean, they can work between fathers and daughters too, but we have more underachieving boys, so it becomes a more frequent recommendation. So keep in mind the importance of role models, and there are good trips, there are lessons learned, and yes, they can identify with the opposite gender as well. And you can see that I have a picture of game playing, very important. Game playing, not video game playing, but checkers or chess or Monopoly can really bring the family together. And game playing at school, like chess or chess teams, can also bring the kids together. The next thing that I talk about very importantly, particularly for those dependent kids, the anxious kids, is positivism and gratefulness. We have to be really, really important, really, really, careful not to put children in the position of always feeling sorry for them. Because, classical conditioning, Pavlov's dogs, that's our unconscious conditioning. If we give love to children and attention only when we're feeling sorry for them, they grow up seeking love by getting people to feel sorry for them. That's just unconscious conditioning. So that gives you a place for teaching positivism and gratefulness at home and in school. At home, certainly it could be done in the name of your religion and prayer, but it doesn't have to be religious gratefulness. It just can't be that when people get together and all they do is gripe and complain and see how terrible the world is, and this is probably more important now than ever, that kids will grow up pessimistic and sad and discouraged. So keeping an upbeat attitude is really, really important. And I want to tell you that the person I learned this from was my daughter Sarah. My daughter Sarah's husband died of cancer when he was 41. And from the time they were married at around 29, a year after they were married, he had cancer. So I was a visitor while they had 2 children and got chemotherapy and bone marrow transplants. And at that family, what I heard when they got together at the end of the day was what they were thankful for. And I can tell you there were a lot of times that they didn't feel thankful. They felt very sad and upset, and it wasn't all great. But somehow they managed to get through that terrible time. I'm only comparing it to a time like COVID that we're going through now, which is a terrible time. And you've heard people in interviews say, what are the advantages of COVID? What are the advantages of COVID? Those are positivists, and that's what we have to do. We have to recognize the disadvantage and the sadness that goes with COVID. We can't ignore that. But we really have to emphasize that look at this nice advantage. Here you are sitting at home, relaxing, watching me instead of sitting up in a chair and having to go to school. So you got a break, and I got a break too. I'm not standing either. I'm just sitting and talking to you and feeling relaxed once we got the computers. And once I really could see your faces and know that there are really people that I'm reaching, I was motivated, and I still am motivated to help you to make for a positive atmosphere. And it's just harder for you now because the kids are at home. I'll try to reach the parents. We just talked while we were at break. I will be reaching, once kids are in school, I'll be broadcasting to parents, new parents, and parents are there trying to help them understand how to facilitate this, how to be parent teachers at home, and how to reach out to you and support their kids at home so they can get through this difficult time. And then I'm going to leave you here with well, no, I'm not going to leave you. There's more after this, I think. Bear in mind, this is from Albert Einstein, that, and I use this particularly with a fifth grader who came to see me and said, this was about 3 years ago at the school. His mother had told me he was frustrated because he had to do all the things in fifth grade that he didn't want to do, and he only wanted to do math, and he loved math, and why wouldn't the teacher let him do math all the time? And I told him, I said, there was a girl right in here before that I was talking to, and she hates math. Should I tell her she shouldn't have to do math? And he said, oh, no, she has to do math. And then I pointed to this poster, which I had put on my bulletin board that I got from a colleague of mine. Bear in mind that the wonderful things you learn in your schools are the work of many generations. All this is put in your hands as your inheritance in order that you may receive it, honor it, add to it, and one day faithfully hand it on to your children. So important. And what I told that boy and what I tell other children, and you teachers need to know that, I say to them, look, your teachers went to school because they want to help you. They want you to be successful. They want you to be happy. They want you to be able to work to your potential. They're not trying to teach you things that will be meaningless. But if they only teach you the things that are easy for you, the things you like, then you're going to be caught and won't be able to do some careers that you don't even know about now that might be exactly what you'd like to do. So just have faith in your teachers and follow their guidance. They will find things that you're interested in. They want to do that, but there'll be some things that are boring, and that's okay because they're important for you to learn. Now, here's the trifocal model where you can be thinking about the child that you picked and how you're going to be helping him or her. You might have 3 in mind, or you might have yourself in mind. But the key to this model is getting home and school to work together. Now, because we can't always do that in the school where there are disadvantaged children, we have a bifocal version of the trifocal model. And that means it's the child and the classroom teacher and some child advocate or a counselor that might be helping you or another teacher that might be helping you get through this. So the key is for children to be getting the message from more than one source, the same message and the same vote of confidence and the same positivity that they can have. And the plan is like this. Here's the part of it that we have to look at. And the counseling group will do this much more in an IAT kind of thing, an intervention. But these are just kinds of things that you might be thinking of when you think about an intervention. first we try some sort of assessment, some indication of what's going on. Why is the child not functioning in that area? That's more an achievement or ability assessment. It might be looking at MAP tests. It might be looking at IQ tests. It might look at observations that you've made or the parent has made at home. Then the second is setting up communication between home and school so that parents are knowing what the child is expected to do, and they're giving you feedback in terms of what the child is doing at home. And the communication can be emails back and forth. It can be notes back and forth. It can be little cards or tokens, depending on we're talking about little kids or big kids. And then changing expectations is helping kids either lower expectations or raise expectations, but getting those expectations to be small gains and expectations so that gradually they can develop confidence, understanding that too high expectations cause problems and too low expectations cause problems. Then the fourth one is that role model identification that we talked about a little earlier. Remember that you potentially are a role model for that kid too. So when you say, yes, this problem reminds me of a problem I had when I was in fourth grade, when I was your age, as long as you follow that with how you figured it out, you become a role model. If, on the other hand, the father or mother says, yeah, I was an underachiever too, but they don't have a solution, then the role model is one of, well, I'm an underachiever. I follow my parents' footsteps and there's nothing I can do about it. So you have to concoct a little bit of that story or tell a little extra of the story in a way that will help the child with that identification so he or she won't continue to be an underachiever. The correction of deficiencies is really looking at, is there really something that has to be corrected? Is it really ADHD medication that might be needed? Is it really that the child really has a reading disability and they need more corrective tutoring? Is there a writing disability? Is there a hearing disability? Is there something that we're missing that we haven't picked up that needs to be corrected? And, that might be in terms of a 504 or an IEP. Then the modifications at home and school will differ whether they're conforming or non-conforming dominant kids. And that's because I have a whole group in my books and my materials, and on my website, for things you do for dependent kids and things you do for dominant kids. And remember that for underachievers, you're really working counterintuitively. If they're pulling you in to do too much for them, you're going to pull them out to gradually, in small steps, help them to become more independent. If they're fighting you and battling you, you're going to try to get them on your side so it isn't a battle and so they realize you're their favorite teacher. That's not an easy thing to do with every kid, but just keep in mind your kid that you have in mind and see if you can come up with a plan to really help them. And I think it is a hard push, and that's what it is. And this seems to be a good time for those questions that you would pass on to me in writing. And I'm not sure how that can be before I kind of